Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you the battle group overview for the 116th Panzer Division, also known as the Windhund or Windhund-Division. And in this one, well, I think this division is quite an interesting one that really relies on a lot of mobile armour and just armoured vehicle play early on in the game, which is actually quite fun and interesting, and it differs quite greatly from other decks. It doesn't have the best amount of infantry available, which is something that can let the deck down quite a lot, but in general I find that it's a pretty strong deck as long as you can get through your relatively weak mid game before you move on to your final form, which is your phase C, where you gain access to your strong AT guns and tanks. So let's jump into the Recon and start to talk through my choices there. So in my Recon tab, I have 2 units of Speertrupp, and these are the 2 available in phase A, and the main reason for bringing in Speertrupp is because they're the only recon infantry available, but also because they are 4-man squads, and they do have the MG available, the MG34. And so these guys can be used as supplement infantry to hold your front line, assisted by your Panzer Grenadiers, because in the infantry tab you only have 4 cards of infantry available in phase A, and you want to be taking all of them. So yeah, you want to be supplementing that with Speertrupp as well where you can. Further to that, you also want to be bringing in the SBW2341s. I think these are awesome recon vehicles, 65 points a pop. It's pretty expensive, honestly, for what firepower they provide compared to other vehicles that are available in other decks. However, with the recon status and the higher front armor than usual, these guys can do a serious amount of damage in phase A. Furthermore, I also have a card of the 2343s, which provide the 9HE power gun at a longer range of 1000 meters. So these can be used in support of your earlier phase A tanks to destroy AT guns very quickly. If these guys get on target or even just land shots next to enemy AT guns, they generally stun them pretty quickly. May not do any damage unless they direct hit, but they'll definitely stun, and that's what matters. So if an AT gun shoots at you, these guys can really pin them down very quickly. I'd recommend bringing in both the 2343s at the same time if you're going to use them, because that way you can always get the 2 shots off onto an AT gun as soon as one is spotted, as opposed to having one on its own. It might just die before it can get a second shot off, that is. Moving into phase B, I'm not sure entirely just yet whether I want to add more SBW 234s, 1s or 2343s available. I would be tempted to bring in more 2343s because they are really useful recon vehicles for dealing with AT guns. But yeah, I'm not so sure just yet. With the extra Speertrupp in phase B, again, it's something that I might consider because of the lack of infantry availability throughout the game. But I haven't been convinced to change out anything else that I've chosen so far on this battle group. So let's move on to the infantry. In the infantry tab, pretty much said it already, you want to be taking all of the infantry available in phase A. And that includes 1 Panzergrenadier, which is something that I've been thinking of swapping out, honestly. 2 Panzer Grenadiers. Panzer Grenadiers, awesome squads. They do have 2-star veterancy as well, which means that the APC also has 2-star veterancy. This half track here with the MG42s. Definitely awesome powerful infantry with that extra veterancy. And then MG42s again with the 2-star experience, 3-star MG42s with 800 meter range. These things can demolish enemy infantry squads, enemy light armor. Really strong unit. Then moving into Phase B, I just take extra Panzer Grenadiers. Straight up, I think they're just better than everything else that's available in Phase B. So yeah, I've been tempted to like maybe drop the Panzergrenadier for a while and just have like extra Panzer Grenadiers in Phase B, or maybe some Pioneers, because you do bring in a lot of SPW 232s in Phase A for the 116th Panzer, and you also gain access to the 2-star Panzer 3s in Phase A. So they could be used to support your infantry very easily. So that actually, I think I might switch those out. Sometimes I like to make these changes on the fly, just because when I'm talking through the units for you guys, I tend to notice these things in the decks, as opposed to when I'm just sort of playing on my own and I'm just sort of skimming through some stuff. I don't necessarily notice, but talking things through often helps. And I think in this case, that's actually quite an interesting change. Just gaining the extra infantry availability moving into Phase B can really uphold this deck's weak Phase B, in my opinion. So you get a really strong Phase A because of the extra availability. Like, you get more requisition points in Phase A than you do in Phase B compared to other decks. So yeah, moving into Phase B, providing yourself with the extra Panzer Grenadiers and the extra Pioneers, and that's even moving into Phase C with those Pioneers, can be very useful, and I think that's a good choice, actually, a good change that I've made there. Sturm Pioneers, they just don't have a place in the deck, in my opinion. Pioneers do what Sturm Pioneers should do, and that's destroy enemy infantry. So Sturm Pioneers, fantastic at 100 meter range, right, for burning out enemy infantry. But Pioneers have two 22 HE power grenades, plus they're efficient at range with their machine gun and rifles. So in my opinion, Pioneers just all round better, because those 22 HE power grenades will destroy enemy squads, majority of enemy squads, in one shot. Whereas the napalm might just cause the opponent to fall back. Definitely stuns things very quickly, but so does 22 HE power grenade. Now, there's also available in Phase B more Panzer Grenadiers in half tracks with 1-star experience. These would be nice if you had more cards available, but I think just having as much availability of infantry as possible in this battle group is a priority, and therefore doesn't find space in my deck because it has lower availability. These MG42s in Phase B, if they had at least 1-star experience, I might consider bringing in one card of MG42s over, say, a Panzer Grenadier or maybe a Pioneer squad. But in my opinion, because they don't have the experience, they aren't worth it, and neither is the half-track really, without the experience. Pioneer Führer, these guys are interesting. They come with a 251-7 half-track. This half-track has 8 AP power, but in Phase C, it's pretty useless. And Pioneer Führer, they're not great. Too low availability to be useful, and you find your command units elsewhere. So that's pretty much my infantry. Focuses on availability. I've removed the Panzergrenadier there because I don't feel that you need the extra command in Phase A. If we move over to tanks, now this is where things get interesting, because we have variants of the Panzer 3s that we've never seen before. But before we talk about those, let's talk about the Bffl Panzer 3 that we have access to. These guys are pretty good, actually. 2-star experience, pretty nice. 90-point tank, can support your infantry very well with its 2 machine guns and its HE power on its main gun. So pretty solid command unit to be assisting not only your infantry but also your Panzer 3Ms. And these Panzer 3Ms, they have upgraded side armor than the normal Panzer 3s, and that's pretty much it. But just in general, they also have the extra experience for 5 more points. And this extra experience is a big deal, because with a Bffl Panzer nearby, or even one of the SPW 232s, you're going to get 3-star Panzer 3s with 5 axis guns, with the 3 like 3-star experience, really strong sniping Panzer IIIs with 10 AP power is just so good. They're really good. And yeah, for 105 points, you can actually bring them in quite often in Phase A. So in Phase A, you're going to have access to 900 points. I would expect if you're going to be playing like a mobile warfare, that you'd be bringing in the majority of these in Phase A. Even if it's just a couple with the Bffl Panzer III, you know, that's 300 points that you've spent there on tanks. And I think that's reasonable in Phase A for this deck specifically. Especially considering they're 3-star tanks. They can demolish enemy half-tracks, enemy light tanks very easily and efficiently, which is lovely. I don't think it's worth bringing in the Panzer IIIL, just because they don't have the same experience, nor the side armor. Not that the side armor makes too much of a difference, but the experience definitely does. And in my experience, I never end up bringing in any of the Panzer IIILs when the Panzer IIIMs are available, because by the time you get to Phase B, you're going to be buying Panzer IVs because they're just better. And Panzer IIIMs, I mean, sometimes you would buy the rest of the Panzer IIIMs instead of buying Panzer IVs just because they do have the extra experience, but the Panzer IIILs just never really make the cut. So moving into Phase B, the tanks aren't fantastic. You either get Bffl Panzer IVs, which honestly you can be tempted to take because they provide you with more leader units, or you can get Panzer IVHs, just a card of 4 of them, which I find has suited me better because I have so much command elsewhere, including the 6 command units in the support tab and the Bffl Panzer III in the tank tab. However, since I've actually moved out the Panzergrenadier from the infantry, it's actually tempting to replace the Panzer IVs with Bffl Panzer IVs. I think I'm just going to leave it for now. And yeah, these may have 1-star experience, but so will these with a command unit nearby. And that's kind of what I'm relying on there. So your Panzer IVs are trying to get you through the mid-game, where you're going to be jumping into fights with Shermans and so on. So that's really why I bring them in. Then moving into Phase C on this deck, you basically have a choice of Panther Gs. And I take all of the ones with the 1-star experience because with a command unit nearby, 2-star experience Panther Gs with their 7 accuracy main gun, really good sniping units, 14 front armor, 17 AP, really a force to be reckoned with. 280 points, not too bad at all. Make sure that you have a command unit nearby to make full advantage or take full advantage of these tanks. So these are really what help you steamroll moving into Phase C. I think that the availability is not worth compared to the experience, which is why I make that choice. So let's move on to the support tab, where we find all of our command units. But before we talk about those, let's talk about the 258. So this is a 45 point unit with the 1000 meter range 9 HE power gun. And these are fantastic for supporting your tanks once your recon has necessarily run out. So I have the 258s in the deck literally to replace the 2343 recon units as soon as I run out. But what I've been considering is possibly switching out some of these chaps for, like, delete this card and maybe get the extra recon in the recon tab to get more 2343s, because the recon on those units is so much better. But for now, I think we're just going to keep it as it is, because I find that having a lower cost 1000 meter range 9 HE power gun is actually really useful in certain situations, especially when you're fighting a lot of infantry and a lot of like fire support weapons in Phase A, like machine guns and maybe even mortars and so on. You can catch them out with these guys, and they can be very useful for stunning enemy tanks as well. And in Phase A, you can also gain access to the 232s. And if this wasn't the case, I would definitely be bringing in the 259s. But since the 232s are available, these SPW 232s are just so useful because they do have the command radius. Keep these guys with the infantry, use them as fire support, and they will do you wonders. Really, really nice unit with the 1-star experience as well. Take all of them in phase A because they will be your command for the rest of the game. I would bring in like another card of them in phase B with like more availability if that was actually a thing, but it's not, so that's why there's so many phase A units that you can see here. Aside from all that, the other choices in the support tab are Bffl Panzers and Guerrillas, or Guerrillas, as people want me to start calling them. And yeah, basically the Bffl Panzer, in my opinion, really nice 60-point unit, can definitely go to work in a town. I recently got beaten pretty hard by a couple of people who I know. We had like an in-house game. One of these half-tracks drove through like a town, just demolished all of my stuff. Admittedly, it was because my bazooka missed the shot and it pretty much just was game over from there. But in general, these guys can really push an advantage where you can notice a lack of AT in like an enemy defense. So you're fighting infantry, you don't see any bazooka squads, you don't see any like AT guns. Just drive one of these in, flame out the enemy units. They do have a stabilizer so they can fire on the move, and you'll be having a great time. These can do some serious work. And since I've seen that, and since I've you know, done it in the past myself to other people, I've really enjoyed using these units. They're very fun to use. The Guerrilla is I don't know, I just find that although it is very powerful with the 27 HE power, it's just expensive for phase A, and I never end up bringing it in. I just end up using the autocannon units all the time. And in phase B, there's just not a slot left, since I do bring in some phase A supply to resupply all of the autocannons on these 232s and the machine guns as well. So that's my support tab. Let's move on to anti-tank. Anti-tank in this deck is quite interesting. I think what I do in this one is basically I have the Pak 38s in phase A because it's you need to have AT in phase A. And I need availability, so I don't go for the 1-star Pak 38s, although they are quite a lot better, honestly. Like 1-star veteran Pak 38s will hit so much more than a Pak 38 that's not 1-star veterancy. And a 2-star Pak 38 will do even better. I just find that in like a 1v1 or even a 2v2 or higher, you need at least 3 AT guns to cover all of your flanks. Especially like as phase A continues. And especially in this deck, considering I don't have any phase B AT guns. But that's mainly due to the fact that I rely on my tanks a lot more to provide AT support. So maybe I could even drop the Pak 38s for Pak 38s with the extra star. This is something that I would definitely recommend trying out, but in my opinion, just more availability for now. My main AT comes from the Panzer 3s in phase A. AT guns are more here just to be defensive and deterrence in this deck, I think, because you are so reliant on your strong phase A tanks. 2-star Panzer Trek squads, something to think about. Just doesn't really find a slot, especially when you only have 4 slots available in the anti-tank tab. Same with the modded 3s. Nice range, 13 AP power for phase A. Not enough availability on a card though. Moving into phase B, Panzer Treks not really finding a space, and then you got access to your Pak 40s. And Pak 40s are again something that might be useful, but I'm still relying on my tanks at this point. So yeah, I don't know, I might bring in like a couple of Pak 40s instead of a Pak 43, but in moving into phase C, I think these Pak 43s are really important. Now in Phase B you can get access to 4 Marder 3s on one card, which is actually quite nice. They don't have any veterancy though, which I find really lets them down. You can also get Panzer 4s. Again, if they had some veterancy, I would think about replacing them with a card of these Pak 43s, but since that's not the case, I'm not going to bring them in. But as we move into Phase C, we can get Pak 43s with 1-star veterancy, and these jumbo killers are definitely worth it most of the time. They can do some serious damage if you let them. Furthermore, I also have a card of 2 Panzer 4s with the experience, and these are the most epic M10 counters ever because they have the 14 front armor and can deal with the 13 AP power guns nicely at 1200 meter range. So they can kill off the Shermans, the M4A3s with the 76mm guns, and also just M10s. That's what you want to be using Panzer for. If you're coming up against anything more powerful, use your Panther Gs, because these have the AP power to cut through those pesky tanks. So the anti-tank, I think, would vary a lot on this deck depending on how much you rely on your AT guns compared to tanks. I think so far I've got it pretty sorted. Moving into Phase C, I think you need the 22 AP power from the Pak 43s to deal with anything that your Panthers are struggling with, like Jumbos for example. That's just me. I'm not so sure about my AT tab on this deck, but that's how I'm going to leave it for now. Let's move on to anti-air. With the anti-air, I think this is pretty simple. I think the mobile wagons are just the best in this situation. The Gepards with their 20mm autocannons aren't fantastic for Phase A. Mobile wagons, you only get one of them availability in Phase A. Again, not really worth it in my opinion. However, getting 2 mobile wagons on each card here is actually quite nice. They're 1000 meter range, 12 HE power, same gun as the 37mm flak on the ground, and they're mobile with a decent amount of armor. So they're not going to get strafed to death, which is quite a nice thing. And they're also going to be quite hard to use artillery on. So these guys can really sit there and be persistent damage against enemy aircraft for the majority of the game, as long as you don't let them get sniped directly by opposing armor. I really like the mobile wagons, and I think they will keep you going for the entire game if you keep them out of direct line of sight of enemy AT or tanks. You can just continuously add like another one every now and then to your arsenal, and that should carry you through any match. More Gepards in Phase B, not really an idea that I think is worth it. And I mean, the quad flak filling available on this truck, kind of nice in Phase C that you get 4 availability, but the truck is not armoured, and like I was saying before, that means that they can be strafed by opposing aircraft, and I guess unless you have a lot of them, that might happen. So be careful if you're going to choose to bring these chaps in. Let's move on to artillery. So the artillery tab in this deck is, it's okay. I'm not too convinced about it. I have 2 Panzerwerfers available in Phase A. Panzerwerfers are really strong because they fire 2 salvos of 10 rockets, which you can cancel and refire. So, for example, you can fire 5 rockets, you can cancel the shot, fire 5 more, then let the thing reload. And that's really nice thing that you can do with the Panzerwerfer that I quite like in order to hit multiple positions with 1 reload. But also, just Panzerwerfers are just great in general for a stunning large amount of units early on, and really taking the initiative. So there is a game where one of my friends bets, he uses one of these or both of these at the start of the game in Phase A, and really locks down a sector of the enemy allowing us to take great advantage of that early on in the game, which was really, really nice. And I think it's just a good example of how these Panzerwerfers can be used so well. So hopefully you guys go check that video out. It should be up soon enough. The other thing I have in Phase A is a Mortar Carrier. This is to provide me with my smoke that I probably need at some point, as well as just some, you know, pinning artillery. Mortar's always doing that job. Moving into Phase B, you can get access to another Mortar Carrier. Not really worth it in my opinion moving into Phase B. You can also get access to some off-map artillery in the form of 173mm off-map artillery, but I just don't think it has that great of a HE power or AoE damage to make too much of a difference. Also, this tank is completely useless with just one machine gun. And these Wisps, well, they're a choice, but in my opinion, I bring in the Hummels because their 27 HE power and pretty decent range hasn't let me down yet. Whereas the Wisps, I find their lack of HE in comparison is quite underwhelming. Although they do have the ability still to smoke your units, which can be really useful in certain situations, especially if your mortar ends up getting itself killed. But just be careful with this mortar and don't let it die, and then you should be okay. You can get Nebelwerfers into Phase C, but I think since I take 2 Panzerwerfers in Phase A, kind of makes up for that, and there's no point in really taking a card of Nebelwerfers to me in order to rocket the opponents. We move on to the air tab. I just take 2 Me-109 G6R6s with the 2-star veterancy, one in Phase A, one in Phase B, because these are the best fighters available on this deck. And then I have a card of the Focke-Wulf 190G1s, which are not only decent in the air, but also have the 15 HE power bomb, which can swiftly dispatch of enemy AT positions and fire support weapons. Now in Phase A you can get access to the Ju-87G, but since you don't have enough air slots to support that at the same time, I don't think it's worth bringing in at all. Recon just takes up an extra slot for no reason, and the Focke-Wulf 190G3, this has 5 HE power bombs and it's just not great. Now moving into Phase B, the Me-109G0, this is something that you could consider to take instead of another Me-109 G6R6 with the 2-star veterancy, because having more availability is sometimes better than having more experienced planes, because if you're playing in a multiple multiple game with like multiple more people, so 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, you can find that you'll get outnumbered in the sky, and that can generally lead to the majority of your planes being shot down, so you've got to be careful about that for sure. Focke-Wulf 190G1 was my plane of choice. You can gain access to the Ju-87Gs, but just having a fighter bomber that is much more versatile, in my opinion, is worth it, and it generally does better to me than the Me-109G2 BR2 with the 2 rockets available. So if we look at the Me-109 compared to the Focke-Wulf 190, the Focke-Wulf 190 retains its good agility, gets 20 km/h more speed, its resilience is better, and it also has more guns. So the Focke-Wulf 190G1 not only does the same job as the rocket Me-109, but also dogfights better as well. You can also get Focke-Wulf 190 with a 2-star veterancy, but again, we need the availability. Furthermore, 7 HE power, 14 of those bombs on this Ju-87. Great for mass stunning a unit. Doesn't find a space in my deck because of availability. Same with the other Ju-88s, the ones in Phase C having the 2 25 HE power bombs. Now maybe if I had an extra activation point available, I might plop in a 2-card pack of Ju-88s, but in this case it's just not going to happen. And that's pretty much everything. So if we just save that and we back out, there's quite a lot to talk about since I've actually talked through all of these units. So the way I play this deck currently is having a relatively strong phase A push using motorized units. So I'll use Panzer Grenadiers and MG42s to secure the infantry positions using their half tracks as fire support, and then I'll probably use the Panzer III combination to penetrate the lines where I think they're weakest. Furthermore, I'll also be bringing along my SPW 232s to provide the extra experience for both the infantry and the tanks, so I'll have at least one of them supporting the Panzer Grenadiers in this case. And then I'll be using Speertrupp to provide my Recon in the early game, because not only do they provide Recon, but they also provide infantry presence, which is nice. And the 234s 1 and the 2343 Recon vehicles, they can also be handy in phase A, although I don't find myself bringing them in so much, which is why I was tempted to bring in another card in phase B. Now further to all that, the Pak 38s are pretty much a must in my opinion in phase A, just to give yourself some form of defense for where you're not pushing with your tanks. And then the mobile wagons, well, they'll do the job moving into phase B. From then on, you want to make sure that none of your mobile wagons die throughout the entire game. Just keep them alive, keep them in like a pack of 4, and you'll always have like an area on the map where you can dogfight safely, having the advantage against enemy aircraft. In phase A, if you're coming up against enemy hard points, then Panzerwerfers are the way forwards. They will dislodge enemy units quite easily, and they can do quite a lot of damage. You can choose to bring one in off the start of the game if you're working with your team. That can work because Panzerwerfers can demonstrate a lot of destruction, but it can be an overinvestment in requisition points early on, especially when you want to be investing in your more expensive infantry, just to make sure that you can hold the line where you need to. If you're finding you're needing a smoke support, then bring in the Mortar Carrier. And if things are going dodgy in the air early on, then the ME-109 2-star should be decent enough to take on enemy fighters one-on-one, although it can suffer against faster fighters like the Mustang. So be careful about that. Maybe wait until phase B where you can bring in your second one, and two 2-star ME-109s should be able to do the job between them. It's all about timing when it comes to the air though, so just don't get caught out. Now in phase B it is pretty weak because you do have just Panzer IVs in your tank tab, and there's not really any more AT available. So you're still going to be relying on your Panzer IIIs. Your Panzer IV is going to be your primary AP. And then you're going to be wanting to like reinforce yourself with Panzer Grenadiers and Pioneers moving forwards. Then moving into phase C, that's where you're going to be wanting to add the Panther Gs to your front line, or a Jagdpanzer, depending on what you're coming up against. I explained that whilst I was going through it. And then that Pak 43s, again, just to help hold the line if things are going a bit pear-shaped. And the Hummel, well, that's just going to help you destroy those annoying artillery positions. In general, I think I've balanced this deck relatively well. I guess one change that I might make is removing one of the Pak 43 cards and bringing in a card of Pak 40s instead, like phase B AT. And then another change you could make is definitely like switching out some of the support units for, maybe if you don't like Flam Panzers, bring in the Guerrillas. They should do a decent job for you. And that's about it. I don't tend to play 116th Panzer so often, so I'm very interested to hear your opinions and your thoughts on this deck and on this battle group in general. Let me know what your guys' battle groups look like. But in the meantime, that's all. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.